So last Sunday in my sermon about the downfall of King Solomon, I used an illustration that I thought was fairly clever. And the point that I was trying to illustrate was that Solomon's massive failings at the end of his rule resulted from small decisions early on in his life. In other words, big spiritual problems, this was the takeaway, any problems really, but big spiritual problems usually start with very small, almost imperceptible problems that aren't corrected when they're small. That was the takeaway. And that takeaway was correct. Like Mark Deaver said, a small difference in trajectory can make a big difference in destination. Now, then I tried to illustrate it like this. This is what I said. I said, imagine that you took off in a plane from Wall Airport and you flew around the world, but your course was off by just 1 degree. Well, I said, at the very beginning, you wouldn't be very far off track. But I said, if you flew all the way around the world trying to land in the same spot, by the time you'd be done, a 1 degree difference at the beginning, at the end of that journey around the globe would have you off by over 400 miles. And the basic math comes from the navigation rule of thumb that's called the 1 in 60 rule. That says that every 1 degree of difference in navigation yields a 1 mile difference from your destination for every 60 miles flown. So the circumference of the Earth is about 25,000 miles, and so a 1 mile distance for every 60 miles, pull out the calculator, and you get over 400 miles. But that assumes, here's the flaw, that the Earth is flat and not a sphere. And I'm proud to say, at least one person, Tim Mucha, if you're interested, one person in our congregation was smart enough to know that the Earth isn't flat. It wasn't the 1 in 60 rule that was the problem. Pilots use that all the time. And it wasn't the logic that small differences in course at the beginning lead you to big differences in your destination. That's not why the illustration was flawed. The illustration was flawed because I pushed it too far. Because the Earth isn't flat, it's a sphere, it's a globe. And, follow me here, a full circumference of a sphere will always return you to the same spot. Find a globe somewhere, or a basketball, and try it. If my destination point on the circumnavigation of the globe is the same as my starting point, and you assume a bunch of other things constant, like the rotation of the Earth and all that kind of stuff, but if you start at one point and go all the way around from any point, then any degree of difference may give you a different route around the sphere, but you'll still land where you started and not in a different place, which of course is a terrible way to illustrate what I was trying to say. So how should I have illustrated it? Well, there's lots of different ways that you can tweak it to make it work, including some really good real-life examples. But like I said, the science and the math of the 1 in 60 rule works perfectly if you're not talking about a full trip around the world from point A back to point A. Instead, you should think of it like point A to point B. Not a full circle around the world, but a navigation, say across a country. For example, if I said that a pilot set his course from New York to Los Angeles, distance of about 2,500 miles, and he was off by 1 degree, then it is very true that the place that he would end up if he's flying from New York to Los Angeles with a 1 degree difference, he's going to end up about 40 to 45 miles away from his destination. That's not insignificant. Now, at the beginning, the difference would have been very, very small, but at the end, that difference would have been larger. And then, if I had done it that way, everything spiritual and personally helpful that I tried to say about paying attention to sins while they're small and while correction is easy, all of that would have still been valid. So, what's the takeaway for the preacher here as he sits at the desk? Well, first lesson, it's good to remember that every illustration, every analogy, every metaphor can usually be pushed too far. And the preacher needs to be careful to know the limit, lest what is potentially helpful becomes just plain wrong. Second lesson, it's good to be challenged, to think more deeply about something, even when it hurts your brain, even maybe when it hurts your pride. Third lesson, the Earth isn't flat. That's an idea, the flat Earth idea at least, that should have been left on the desk.